PTF back with you for annually what is a very popular video when we turn to our European expert here at In the Money Media and do a rattle through the European entries at this year's Breeders' Cup. She's going to be on the grounds with us next week, giving us daily updates Tuesday through Thursday. She's going to be hosting our not our monster pod, our final answers pod / video cast. That's going to go live Wednesday at 4:45. Make sure you subscribe to the In the Money Media YouTube channel to not miss notifications about that and all our exclusive YouTube content, much of which will be featuring this woman. You know her from the work she does at Sky Sports and Betfair and elsewhere. She's Vanessa Ryle. Vanessa, what's up?
Well, I can't wait to get to Heathrow Airport and get on the flight to Del Mar, basically, because it's currently lashing it down here in England. We're kind of wrapping up the turf season, last domestic Group 1 of the season coming up this Saturday with the Futurity Stakes. It's going to be a good race, but after that, it's kind of jumps racing. So the Breeders' Cup is my last kind of flat hurrah before we really get into the jumps game, which of course your listeners and viewers would have no interest in.
Not true. We have some down the rabbit hole fans who like the sticks as well, but obviously we are more of a flat racing crew. And who would have thought? Is this now your third Breeders' Cup in a row?
Yeah, it'd be third Breeders' Cup in a row. And what it's going to mean is I feel like I've just hit the main targets with Keeneland, Santa Anita, and then Del Mar. So yeah, it's going to be great. As per what I said last year after Keeneland, and the same rules apply. I don't know what to expect. It's very different events. You know, it's the same in so many ways, but obviously different venues make it a very different event year on year. So not sure what to expect. Very much looking forward to it. Can't wait to be your kind of eyes and ears on the ground. Let's move on and talk all things European shippers. I actually am just going to put it out there. I just don't think this is one of our strongest years.
Interesting.
I mean, look, we've got loads to talk about, and we're going to we'll be, rattling on with this over time limit as always with me and you, Pete. But when you really look down through it, there's not quite the same stories of maybe smaller trainers winning your in type races that we would normally have. I don't think the Godolphin contingent is as strong as it has been previously. And the same rules might apply to the Cornwall contingent as well. And we've got some other trainers with names in there and horses coming over, and we've got plenty to talk about. But as an overall viewpoint, I don't think the Irish and British are as deep as they have been previously. Not saying we're not going to win a whole host of races, but I just don't think we're quite as deep.
I'm hearing that your socks are not knocked off. Your socks firmly on at the moment.
Socks are on. Socks are on.
Yeah. So we should put in, I did a plug already, but I'm going to do another one. This is the starting point of a conversation. We're going to rattle through. We're going to go through rather quickly here, sort of an introduction, but we're going to have a ton more content when it comes to these Breeders' Cup European shippers. We're going to have a whole other shows on the Japanese shippers. And if you subscribe on our In the Money Plus side, we're going to have horse-by-horse write-ups with figure equivalencies, all kinds of data you're going to want to get. That's inthemoneypodcast.com/plus. And I already referred to the final answer show that Vanessa will be hosting Wednesday of Breeders' Cup week. That's where she'll be giving her final answers, her selections. This isn't a selection show so much as an overview, but let's start overviewing with a race on Friday, be 5:45 Eastern time for the Juvenile Turf Sprint. And we got a whole lot of them to go through in here, Vanessa, starting with Asterius, this Archie Watson trainee, Group 2 winner back home. Is this one you're surprised is running here at Del Mar?
Not surprised. No, one of two in here for Wathnan Racing, along with shareholder, meaning that their retained jockey, James Doyle, is going to have to make a choice between shareholder and Asterius. I think Asterius is more exposed, is 4 from 6 so far, has the beating of Big Mojo on the Flying Childers on that latest run. But Shareholder's kind of the unexposed type for the same owners in there. It's had a lot less racing in comparison, only run 3 times. Last run was a poor run behind Whistle Jacket, who also runs. That was over in Deauville in the pre-morning. That was off a bit of a break, and that was almost a too bad to be true performance, Pete. You know, like one of those races that I'm almost happy to put a line through, because you know that's not his ability, but he does need to bounce back from it.
Let's move on to Arizona Blaze. It's Adrian Murray, runner for Ammo Racing, big players on the international scene. This one is Group 1 placed and been there or thereabouts a whole lot. Maybe had a little bit of trouble finding the winner's circle. How serious of a contender is Arizona Blaze?
Not for me. I think you can see by his profile, he keeps kind of getting put in his place by a few horses who sit further above him in the pecking order. Lots of linking form lines coming in here, but on all known form, he's not in the winning groove enough up at this level for him to be a contender here anyway.
Big Mojo, one thing that leaps out to me is we're looking at connections that won the race last year. Mick Appleby certainly knows what it takes to win this one. Could he make it 2 in a row with Big Mojo?
He could. Yeah, he could. Goodwood Group 2 winner, huge day, huge Goodwood Festival for these connections. Same owners, of course, with Big Evs last year, like you say. Asterius had the beating of him at Doncaster in the Flying Childers, but they were closely matched that day. It wasn't a sort of definitive beating, and they very much flagged up after Goodwood that it was back to the Breeders' Cup with Big Mojo they were going. So I think they've kind of worked back from Goodwood to this, and they so enjoyed their experience at Santa Anita that they're so keen to bring Big Evs back, which of course they're doing. We'll talk about that shortly. I don't think Big Mojo is a Big Evs, but he's right bang there.
Celandine, next on the list, like so many of these, has only run on the straight. That was one thing I meant to point out when we were talking Arizona Blaze. At least he had the Dundalk left-handed run. So many of these, we're trying to make an assessment. How are they going to handle the conditions? Another thing I noticed about Celandine is the best race coming at 6 furlongs in a straight. So that's so much more galloping than 5 furlongs around a bend. Do you think Celandine, do you think she will be suited by this American configuration?
She may well have been, and she's a filly I really like, but she's not coming.
Oh, okay. Well, I should have asked you that beforehand. We'll skip over the Japanese runner. Again, we're going to have a whole other video on that. I'm recording that just a few hours after this, so it's probably elsewhere on your YouTube channel. I know several of the O'Briens that were originally mentioned are not coming. Is Ides of March going to be making the journey? And what do you think of his chance?
As far as I'm aware, he is. He was a non-runner recently in the Middle Park. Now, that was because of soft ground. He's a round tower winner. He'd definitely be a second string here behind Whistle Jacket, who's your pre-morning winner, who's danced all the dances this year. He travels. He was beaten second in the Middle Park by a very impressive Godolphin winner that day. But you know that he just sort of takes his racing, goes about his job. He is a Group 1 winner, and he'll definitely be the main contender above Ides of March.
We'll move on to Magnum Force for Jer Lyons.
Yeah, don't know if he's going. I'm questioning that.
Okay, I do see him on a list that was updated fairly recently, but another one with form that ties in was favored back in the Flying Childers over Asterius, and Big Mojo ran third to them. Runner will do a little bit more digging on and be covering in other shows for sure. You already gave us your thoughts on Shareholder a little bit earlier. Anything to add for that other Wathnan Racing color bearer?
No, look, I think of the 2 Wathnan horses, if I had to choose one, I think I like the sort of less exposed, more lightly raced Shareholder. But you are going to have to forgive him that run behind Whistle Jacket in France. And, you know, Whistle Jacket is a really solid horse. And when a horse is blown out like Shareholder did that day, you just question, like, why and how and what, you know, there's no confidence that he's not going to do that again.
One more whistle jacket question before we move on to the juvenile fillies turf. How do you think whistle jacket will be suited by the sharp distance and the bend specifically?
The distance, the sharpness of the challenge is a concern for him. Definitely is a concern. But I mean, in Aidan we trust.
Right,
In Aidan do we trust? I don't know. Like, if you know, I just don't like. It's such a cliche because I've said it on this pod before, but it's that thing of like they don't bring them just for like the holiday, and we've seen so many times Aidan O'Brien runners who, for whatever reason, we looking at the form have predicted are not suited to a certain test over in America. And then I'm not saying that they've necessarily won, but they've run very well, right up to standard and maybe been beaten by better horses on the day. There's a couple of horses last year, those O'Brien second strings, rattling on late in the finish when you think that it's not going to suit, and it does. So I'm just reluctant to say that you get what I'm saying.
I do. Is it as much? I feel like in the States at this point, when I analyze turf sprint specifically, there's such a difference between a horse that I'm going to like at 5 furlongs versus 6 furlongs. Is there, or do you have similar prejudices? Do certain horses have certain predilections, or is it more common that if you get 5, you get 6 and vice versa?
I mean, you get those out and out 5 furlong horses, like the real 5 furlong 2-year-old rockets. And, then they get caught out and they're stepped up to 6. We see that plenty. So that is a concern for sure. That sort of, it's, it can be perceived as not necessarily a big jump, but I think it's such a specialist. Being a 2-year-old 5 furlong horse is a real specialist thing.
Yeah, I think it's a totally different deal personally, and it is something that we'll be paying attention to. Let's pivot though to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf. We'll start with a runner who is Irish bred, American owned, Team Valor Gary Barber, owners of Anshota, who's been plying her trade over in Great Britain. This one looked a little light to me on figures and form for a test this intense, but where do you think she measures up?
Well, she disappointed in the May Hill, but she was a big price that day. No connections were disappointed in her, but that was at Doncaster. And, that was a step up in grade for her, and she got caught out. More for me would be needed from her ideally at this stage, but it's one of those things where it's great to have David Loughnane with a runner over here again, and great that he's got such international owners in the yard. He wouldn't necessarily be a big he's not necessarily a big trainer, and he'd have plenty of horses in fairness. But I mean, I think she'd need more needed.
It's always nice to see trainers outside of the mega trainers having their shot to win on the Breeders' Cup stage. I mean, they may, not that they're small time, but just, so much power is consolidated amongst the biggest guns. It's always nice to have a story where we can bring in somebody else, especially as people who report on this stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And that was one of the joys last year of the Mick Appleby story with Big Evs. Like that was such a focus point, and it can really draw in bigger names. I think, if you're a casual racing fan back home, and the Breeders' Cup is all about like Godolphin and Coolmore bringing horses over and winning a load of races, it's hard to really kind of get attached to that sort of story or relate. Whereas, the Mick Appleby story last year with Big Evs, we'll talk about it, but that whole angle, and a bit the same sort of level of trainer with David Loughnane. Very good trainer, but, not that superpower.
I'm hearing Bubbling is not making the trip. Celandine also listed, pre-entered for the Juvenile Fillies Turf. Is she going here, or is she not coming at all?
No, I don't think she's coming at all. That's what I've been told anyway. I hope I'm not just writing her off unfairly.
We'll stick with that info, and we'll loop back to it and make sure we make a point in future coverage if that ends up not being the case. That brings us to this Gavin Cromwell runner, Fiery Lucy, as we continue in alphabetical order through the pre-entries.
Yeah, I mean, again, she's there, but I'd be surprised if she is there. Gavin Cromwell has a whole host of runners at the moment, jumps predominant jumps trainer, predominantly famous story. He used to be the yard's farrier, and then he became a trainer himself. Great story, and now he's potentially got a Breeders' Cup runner. But she's 1 from 6, and she's only won a maiden. I think it would be pretty far-fetched to suggest that she would be, even if she's suited to the test. It's a long shot to see her winning a race like this.
I should point out the potential host fail in continuing to go alphabetically through this race when there is one that towers above them that starts with a V. But we'll get there. We'll talk first about that one, stablemate, Heaven's Gate.
Yeah, Heaven's Gate. Look, they clearly thought loads of her because of the way that this is Team Aidan O'Brien, Coolmore, because of the way she'd been campaigned. You know, she's been kept really busy. She started early. She's very progressive. She went on to Royal Ascot and beyond after that. She comes here off the back of the Weld Park win. This is a step up in trip for her off the back of that. That I think will suit her, but she's a second string in here, isn't she? Let's be honest.
And the next one, I actually had it backwards. It's not Victoria Lake. It's Lake Victoria, of course. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say she's the juvenile with the best form in the history of the Breeders' Cup to make the trip over for one of these juvenile races. A perfect 4 from 4. Group 1, a brace of Group 1 wins, to use your phrase. We don't say a brace over here, but I like to throw it in from time to time, make me feel fancy. I think many are surprised she's even coming here. It's great to see that runners have had such success at the Breeders' Cup and got on to win classics over there, that there's no fear anymore about shipping one over and then having that take anything out of them for the spring of the 3-year-old year. How much do you like Lake Victoria? How suited do you think she'll be to USA style racing?
Well, I mean, it's hard not to like her, let's be honest. You know, like you say, 4 from 4 with those 2 Group 1s at 6 furlongs and 7 furlongs. She's proven herself to be so versatile. 7 furlongs over here on a European track versus the mile over with you guys here. You'd hope that it's not going to affect her too much, or that she's not going to have too much of an issue with it. She is the horse, one of the Coolmore horses they seem to have the most kind of to say about, the most confidence behind, maybe, other than the absolute obvious other one, which we'll talk about later on the show. But look, she's a standout. She's a standout at this stage. But and no buts. Sorry, no buts. She's just a standout, full stop. And it's great if she runs, and if she's on the plane and she comes over, it's a real treat. And like you say, well, like Aidan O'Brien says, to use a line that he has said himself, the world is a smaller place these days. You know, it's easier to travel horses. It's easier for them to recover. It's easier for them to come back because of modern technology. And as a result, you know, we get to see horses like Lake Victoria, a standout European juvenile, going over to America.
6-5, the best price on offer right now. Honestly, I think that's pretty darn good looking at form and figures. And I would expect on the tote on the day, she'd be closer to something on the order of 4-5. Does that sound crazy to you, that I'd be interested in potentially betting her at around even money for a test like this? Or does it sound about right?
No, it sounds about right for sure. Yeah. I mean, if she was, I don't know, I'd have to look into it a bit deeper at this stage. But if she was to line up against those horses, the ones we've mentioned, I mean, she goes off, I don't know, 1 to 10 against and showed her Fiery Lucy, Heaven's Gate, and do you know what I mean? Like, so it's then about what price, what you make of the opposition that you've got to offer. And it doesn't sound like you think that there's anything of the level of Lake Victoria. So, and that by process of elimination, you get to thinking that her price right now, her anti-post price, is pretty healthy.
Let's move on to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. I'll throw a curveball at you here. Pull a fast one, throw a curveball. We'll talk about a couple of originally European-based who've run in North America already in the summer stakes, starting with Al Qudra, who I thought was beaten pretty comprehensively by New Century last time, but she did have a rough journey. The margin would have been close. As I say that, I'm remembering the trips, and the margin probably would have been a little closer, but I don't know. New Century just feels a bit more progressive at this stage. We'll talk about them as a pair, Al Qudra and New Century. What was your impression of them this season, and what do you expect to see at the Breeders' Cup?
Well, Al Qudra obviously was, when beaten by New Century in that Woodbine It's a grade 1, wasn't it? Yeah,
Yep,
it was.
summer,
Yeah, sorry.
grade 1.
Of course it was. Yeah. He was sent off favourite that day, and obviously with the connections and his profile, you can see why it wasn't a bad run, and you can once again make a very valid case for him running extremely well here. He's got his stablemate, hasn't he, in Amori City, but we might as well bounce to New Century as well. New Century, when you asked me to pull up a list of top European horses that I was looking forward to, just not necessarily even think is going to win, but just sort of angles in to make this a more interesting 2 days. New Century made that cut very clearly, because I just think, Andrew Balding doesn't have loads of runners over here, is looking for a first Breeders' Cup win. The fact that he sent him over to Woodbine for that grade 1 Summer Stakes was really interesting off the back of what he'd done here. You can pick apart his form over here in some ways, but in other ways it really stands up. And I just think with the Qatar racing angle, Sheikh Fahad spending more and more time in America, now engaged to an American lady, of course, as well. So he's over in America a lot more. I actually think, is that his base now? Maybe even. Either way, it'll be, so important for him to have a horse like this in New Century, given the connection. Kamiko's first grade 1 winner. Just there's so much importance in and around New Century. Yes. And then the Balding factor really adds to it as well.
For those that don't know, they also stand Qatar Racing, Sheikh Fahad stand Kamiko. So yeah, all the more important. Didn't sound like you had too much to add on who seems like a pretty clear second stringer in Amori City. So unless you had anything to add there, I say we pivot and move on to Henri Matisse.
Henri Matisse, who I loved in the early days, looked an absolute cracker early on at the Curragh. Couple of wins there. He gets to the front and he looks around, and we were all saying, oh, he's just green in front. He's just green in front. He's still got to learn. Well, last 2 runs, something has gone amiss with Henri Matisse. He's gone from being green to being, I don't want to, not a dog, but he's got, I don't know. I had him down as this big work in progress, and now bang, he's just throwing away his races. He's kind of seems like he's gone off the boil a little bit. He's getting too keen in his races early on. He's just not helping himself or his jockey. He goes left and right under pressure with the Persuader. He's just very hard to weigh up, and yet he looked an absolute top-notcher at one stage. One of Aidan's best 2-year-olds midway through the summer.
Doesn't seem like one who's necessarily going to be up to the additional challenges here of the tight track and the bends, right? I mean, if it's not, you want more of a push-button handy horse, not a horse with a mind of his own when it comes to,
Very true. Hadn't really sort of thought about it in terms of envisaging him going round Del Mar, but you're right. You're right. That may not help him. May help him settle. I don't know.
Fast pace, you'd figure, might help, but this is one we'll come back to, because I'm very curious. You've done a great job over these last few years of seeing these in the flesh and sort of knowing who's coming back into form, knowing who looked maybe a little bit confused by the surroundings. I'll say this, just in terms of raw form, the 2 Group 1s, beaten 3/4 of a length and beaten less than 3 in, the incredibly prestigious Leger. This is form that can win a Breeders' Cup Juvenile. So in form terms, you wouldn't be dismissing, but I'm a little bit concerned about the mental picture you're painting, no pun intended, of Henri Matisse. We'll return to him as our conversations continue throughout the next couple of weeks on the In the Money Media YouTube channel, which again, we encourage you to subscribe to.
Week now. I mean, how mad is that? We're talking about this. It's a week today will be the eve of the Breeders' Cup. It's mad. But anyway, on we go.
Hill Road up next, another of these Ammo Racing Adrian Murray runners. Just the 2 starts, looked exposed in the Group 1 level last time, but does have a left-handed win around Leopardstown, which can be a good pointer of horses that will at least like the configuration in the USA. What do you make of this one?
I don't have Hill Road on my shipping list, I'm afraid.
Okay, may not be coming then. That's news, but interesting to note. Probably would have been over the head. You can understand cooler heads prevailing there. I have Monumental on my sheet. Do you have this Aidan O'Brien runner?
No, got that as a red line through that, I'm afraid.
That's okay. We don't need to worry about it.
Just to be clear, I'm working off a shipper's list that I've been given in terms of all international runners that are shipping in has come from a sort of central point, and they've put red on those that they have down as not traveling.
No worries.
It's a handed on list. But yeah, next on my list, I've got, well, basically the two Hugo horses, which are still on the list in Seagulls 11 and the Wacko Kid. This is for Hugo Palmer. Again, kind of like put him in there. This is for very layman's terms, this for American listenership, obviously, but put him in the kind of David Lotnane category in terms of size of yard. He trains up at Football and Michael Owens' private kind of establishment. And so as a result, Seagulls 11 has been the great story this season because it's owned by a whole host of footballers. This sort of slightly goes over my head, but it gives a bit of context to the situation. He ran well, but ultimately well held in the Dewhurst Seagulls 11, and then the Wacko Kid, who's also in here for Hugo Palmer's yard, won the Tattersall Stakes. Now that was on soft ground, and he did that from the front that day. I don't think he's going to have those luxuries again, and that obviously suited him. That would be a concern. They'd be outsiders against the couple of these, the likes of New Century, the Godolphin horses, and even Henri Matisse, despite his quirks. But falls into that category. Great to have a different name on the list. I hope they make the trip. Don't know if they are. Hope they are.
We're going to have one of these divided by a common language issues with the Waco Kid. Wacko meaning something completely different in American English, but I'm warning you, we're going to hear some different pronunciations from different corners on that one.
Okay, great. Good to know. Good to know.
The Wacko. Do you know what does that expression even translate? Do you know a wacko meaning a crazy do you guys have that?
Oh yeah, I think I have heard that before, in fairness.
All right, that does it for Friday. We'll be back with some analysis, high level, of the European shippers on Saturday. But first, want to remind you that this video is sponsored by our friends over at twinspires.com. You can play the Breeders' Cup betting challenge on TwinSpires. Go to twinspires.com/tournaments to find out more about that. And the Kentucky Derby betting challenge is back, a new major for horse racing tournaments, and you can start feeding and qualifying for it. There's a schedule right there, twinspires.com, and then find the tournaments tab. PTF and Vanessa back with you as we make our way onto the racing on Saturday. I suppose we should just go in race order once again here, Vanessa, meaning we'll start off with the fifth race, which is the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, and a horse we've referenced several times already. Why don't we begin our conversation with Big Evs?
Yeah, let's get stuck into this. So Big Evs, obviously last year, a juvenile winner at the Breeders' Cup last year, big story from last year, crack 2-year-old last year, 3-year-old career hasn't gone, it's not gone badly, but he's not unbeaten in his 3-year-old career. He probably hasn't progressed forwards, and probably others around him have probably progressed kind of up to his level and beyond. However, we know that he operates over in America. We know he's an ultimate speedball. We know that the ground isn't going to be an issue. And we know that this has been the big target for him this year. He takes on, I'm gonna link down.
You help lead the way, because you might know some non-runners that I don't have here. So you feel free to lead the way.
No, well, I was just going to say that of the big two in this, the big two in this in terms of European interest for me is Big Evs because of what he did last year, and Bradsell because of what he's doing this year. So it's whether you want to go to that back catalogue of proven American, Breeders' Cup form with Big Evs, or try and look forward to the potential of Bradsell. Both these horses, I think, having their last runs before they retire to stud. Definitely the case with Bradsell. He's going to stand at the national stud, which would be a great addition for European sprint breeders. Very different profile, obviously not seen for the first half of the year, made a comeback in France, and then has gone on to take, Group 1s in proper crack, sprinting style. He jumps out at the Holly Doyle, he makes all in front, and then nothing can get past him. And she has to hold on to him, at the end of a race, because everything else has come off the bridle. It's quite extraordinary. He was beaten in the Abbey when we last saw him, but that was still a really rock solid run on ground that had gone very soft that day. And then they're going to run him here and then retire him. It's a shot to nothing. But of course, because he's already a Group 1 winner, he's already got his place at stud. His stud fee will have already been decided. So it is a shot to nothing. But of course, the big angle with Bradsell is what happened to him last year, Pete. Being spun, when he was meant to run last year, got spun, as we would call it, due to a vet issue or whatever happened. Did we ever really get the final details on that? I don't think we did. And so we know the vetting procedure will be rigorous again. And you can't help think that Connections will be thinking, obviously, I hope lightning doesn't strike twice.
I think they must have done something different. The fact that Aidan O'Brien, who's had such bad luck with those late scratches, is entering or pre-entered anyway. Obviously, they're not all coming, as we're learning, but pre-entered more than he ever had before. They must have had something where, I don't know this for a fact. It's not a conspiracy theory because there's nothing wrong with it, but I'm making stuff up. But I've got to imagine they somehow had a vet, like an approved vet, look at these horses before they're sending them on a plane, because otherwise you just couldn't have incidents like what we've seen with River Tiber and Bradsell and then get this type of participation the next year. So I wouldn't be too worried about that. It is interesting. I mean, you've been a huge Bradsell fan, tipped him multiple times, I think, in both the Nunthorpe and Flying Five on our airwaves. I know you're a huge fan. For me, what's amazing, I'll give you a sneak preview. Again, we're going to have a lot of figure equivalencies and individual write-ups of these horses on the In the Money Plus side. And I'm not going to give away the store. If you want that, you got to pay for it. inthemoneypodcast.com/plus. But I will tell you this. In figure terms, everybody, including me, has been touting Cogburn as the greatest American turf sprinter maybe ever. Bradsell runs figures just as fast. So it makes me think I've been positioning this race a little bit as Bradsell versus Cogburn. Is that selling Big Evs a little short?
Yeah, I think it probably is. And I think Big Evs is a bit of a not forgotten horse. He's not going to be a forgotten horse come the day. But I just think others are coming in here, specifically Bradsell. Obviously, Bradsell, he's punching at a higher level, like form shows that. And we haven't even mentioned Believing. Let's bring in Believing, because she's been the nearly horse. Jesus Christ. If you've been backing Believing this summer, I will say a prayer for you. I will say a prayer for you. I mean, just in the sense of she keeps getting drawn bad. Well, Connections keep blaming her draw. However, you look back at the Abbey run in France, and yes, the draw, whatever, might not have been helpful, but she isn't winning that race at any point. People have a lot of belief in Believing, excuse the pun, but there's only so many times you can keep believing and keep making excuses until you need the horse to deliver. And is this going to be her opportunity to deliver? I don't know.
It's been a long season too. I mean, she's danced a lot of impressive dances. I feel like a minor award is probably the ceiling, just given the running style. Where do you think they would pick for her to be drawn for the Breeders' Cup?
Oh, I've got no idea, because I don't know what the full field is going to be here. I mean, when they say she's been drawn too far away from the pace is what's happened to her in big field sprints over here. So like at Royal Ascot, Bradsell ended up near side and Believing was over the far side. Couldn't really have been further away from him that day. Did the same happen at the Curragh? I think it did. Yeah. So it's I don't know.
Not an issue you're going to see in American racing.
No, well, that's true. Yeah, right. That is true.
So we'll see how she makes out.
I should say after the Longchamp run for Believing, after the Abbey run, she ran on in the closing stages. That was the key with her. She doesn't travel as well as Bradsell, and that's the losing of it for Believing. So I think that, in fact, I just can't remember quite which bit of headgear that they are putting headgear on Believing to try and make her a bit sharper away from the stalls is the point George Bowie was making.
Gotcha. We'll see how it plays out. We should talk about some of these others quickly. Did you have much positive to say about Aesop's Fables? I mean, just looks off form and overmatched.
Yeah, I think, going to struggle here, as is Starlust, who's in there for Rafe Beckett, being well held by a couple of these, Bradsell, Believing, mainly in the Abbey last time, but also elsewhere as well, would have to step forward. Starlust and Aesop's Fable is kind of just like a sprinter. Aidan seems to just throw in at everything and just hope for the best, but he's been caught out at this level, and I think he'd be caught out again.
Excellent. Anything else on the turf sprint, or should we move ahead?
No, I think we move on. What are we moving on to? Oh, the turf now, is
turf
it?
is weirdly, the turf is next in the listing. Not, I don't say that in a judgy way, just it's unusual, often much later in the card, but with the TV schedule, they wanted to keep it sort of as the race before the early classic, which we'll get to in a moment. We did get word just this morning, I don't know if you saw, that Emily Upjohn is going to go here and not the Filly and Mare Turf, maybe because of that little bit of news. We start with her. I'd have liked her a lot more in the Filly and Mare Turf, personally.
Yeah, I couldn't have her here. There's been a lot of chat about there's been a lot of chat about Emily Upjohn this season, full stop. Predominantly probably because of the, Frankie not in Europe anymore and Kieran taking the ride. And then since he's taken the ride, the filly, the mare, it was, top notcher last year and has struggled in Group 1 company all this year. Now she's danced to say she's danced every dance. She started in the Shima Classic. She went on to the Coronation, which she'd won the year before. She was well beaten in that when she gave Kieran a really tough ride that day. She went on to the Pretty Polly, and she was only finished second behind Blue Stocking, who went on to win an Arc. She ran in the Nassau. She was fancied that day. Again, gave Kieran a really tricky ride. He was in a really tricky spot. It was just very hard to get that right. They took her up to York for the Yorkshire Oaks, and she was beaten there. And by this point, we're just kind of starting to lose faith. And then she went to the Vermeer, and she was beaten again by Blue Stocking, the Arc winner. So it's like the form does stack up, and she's not been beaten, streets, but she doesn't seem the force of old Pete. And this is kind of one last hurrah territory. The big story angle here is Dettori getting back on. That'll be the big focus. Dettori and Gosden teaming up together, getting
you just
back
rolled your
on.
eyes, Did you know you did that?
Did I?
You did. It did. You sounded like you've heard enough of this story already. That's what it sounded like to me.
Do you not know the truth of it? I just hope that nobody in Europe listens to this podcast. But the truth of it is I'm a big Kieran Schumacher fan, and Team Gosden have stuck by Kieran all season long. Right?
That's the story I wanted to tell. We actually started a write-up of Emily Upjohn for our friends over at theraces.com. And the whole angle was what a great end to the story when they tried to jock him off. People wanted him jocked off all year. They stuck with him, and now he's going to go win a Breeders' Cup race in the Filly and Mare Turf. And then newsflash, not running in the Filly and Mare Turf. Newsflash, Dettori riding. Newsflash 2, not running in the race.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't know, you've stuck by him so long. And the news only broke today and I've been out all day, but the bits I read, it's like there was a quote of Frankie's ridden Delmar 100 times. I totally get it. Right? Like, you've chosen to put Frankie on instead of Kieran. But you could, she last ran at Longchamp. You could have found Christophe Soumillon, who's ridden Longchamp a million times more than Kieran Schumacher. That's just, I don't know. You're not sticking by your jockey, and you're trying to make an excuse for why you're not, but just say, we're going to put Frankie on because we want to put Frankie on.
Okay, that explains the eye roll. Two other divided by a common language things for you. One goes back to our previous discussion. A lot of Americans might not know what a shot to nothing is. A free roll, a gamble with no cost. That's that one. I do like the shot to nothing. That's a very good Britishism. And then just another pronunciation, which is one that, perhaps because I was born in Nassau County here in New York, I say, Nassau, Same thing, just so folks know. And the race is, I think, the Nassau. I can't help but say Nassau from, going to watch the New York Islanders play hockey and win 4 Stanley Cups when I was a little boy. But let's get back to business here, and we'll do it in the form of a conversation about Content, a runner who's been off form lately. But you go back to York, you go back to the left-handed decent ground run, you see a run that can win a race like the Filly and Mare Turf, where I presume she's going to go, but we'll talk about her here since she's also cross-centered in the turf. What do you think about Content generally?
Yeah, well, obviously you'd have to put a line through her Champions Day run in the Fillies and Mares there, but you can probably blame the ground for that. And the same could probably be said for Longchamp on Arc Day in the Opera. But before that, when she got good to firm and good ground, she was really she was stepping forward with every run. And of course, she won the Yorkshire Oaks and had sit, tie, and form lines here. So, ground is the thing with her, but we expect to see her in the other race, don't we?
Yes. I in truth, I made a mistake, but rather than just pull up, I decided to keep
Plow
going and figure we'll just cover it now and then refer back to it later. Yeah, I think she'll go in the Filly and Mare Turf. And I was just interested to see, and we will come back to it, how big of an excuse you think those runs are. Speaking of runs that need excusing, there's Continuous, who's been nowhere the last twice. You got to go way back to the last left-handed run, and it was a good one. Has excellent form around left-handed bends. Could that be the key to Continuous, or is he simply going to be outmatched here?
I mean, he's a big price, isn't he, in the betting, and he's been very much a Coolmore second or even third string more recently, and I would expect the same sort of theory here. Behind, I mean, is Luxembourg being their main hope here? That's how I have it anyway.
Yes, Illinois would have been in that conversation, but apparently is not coming over. Does that confirm? You have that confirmed on your shippers list? There was a minor injury, I think.
I have him as a red.
Yep.
Yes.
JRB for Brian Meehan. This is a horse coming here off a win at Longchamp. What do you think of this one's chances bringing some French form to the party?
He's been brilliant, this horse. He really has. He's really, progressed on. I mean, he's a good 2-year-old, but he's really progressed on this season. He's a very solid yardstick is how I'd have him. He's got the form, obviously, that hasn't been frank with economics from Deauville. He likes to be nice and forward. He can be a touch keen, but I don't think that'll be too much of an issue here. I love that they're bringing him here. I love that they're rolling the dice. And he's one of those horses that, because of the bigger names around him, may well get overlooked in the market. I mean, only a fraction, but the old adage, if he was trained by someone else, he'd be a couple of points shorter type job.
Mm-hmm.
I know he hasn't hit top level Group 1 form. That is literally proven. Yes. But he hasn't had the opportunity to either. And that's, I suppose, the interesting bit with him is that he's going to be thrown into a top level race now. And I think he'll do I think he'll win? No. Do I think he's well able to be a dog in a fight? Yeah.
My biggest concern is a subpar run going left-handed, which combined with the things you're bringing up make me want to watch one from the 3-year-old.
Are you talking about that the Chester run around the bends?
Yes.
Yeah. That is a concern I actually hadn't thought about.
Let's move on to Luxembourg, who you referenced before, the sort of the A team for Aidan O'Brien, beaten less than 3 in the Group 1 Irish Champion Stakes. Leopardstown, again, a course that often is a good pointer. This one has lots of good left-handed form, as well as some disappointments. What kind of shape do you think we're going to see Luxembourg in for this Breeders' Cup turf?
Isn't he? I think Luxembourg is, that's right. He's a Group 1 winner at 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Very impressive.
Which is it's just more impressive. It's almost unheard of. Obviously, a 5-year-old now, and he got it. Oh, hello.
I can tie it into a sponsor. I'm going to take.
Sorry, I thought I crossed you off there. No, I was just going to say that. Sorry, I just got stuck there.
Gotcha.
you know, he got his Group 1 this year in the Coronation that obviously Emily Upjohn was in and was fancied for, but he got an absolute creme de la creme ride from Ryan Moore out in front that day. It was a proper class, like the rides won him the race. And that was the day he obviously added his 5-year-old Group 1 to his form. He's just a class horse. He hasn't fired since. Obviously, he did disappoint at Ascot, but he's done that before. And then he finished, you know, in the heap behind Economics at Leopardstown in the Irish Champion. Not a bad run. You'd expect him to be forward, leading like he has done previously, and he'll be in there fighting.
He's a little interesting to me. Seems almost like a left-handed specialist. You mentioned that trick of winning Grade 1s at 2, 3, 4, and 5. They're not a sponsor of this video per se, but we'll give them some love because we like them, and they're sponsors of other videos. Millridge Stallion Oscar Performance did that on the way to becoming the successful stallion he's been for our friends over there. So we'll give him a shout out for sure. We should talk about the horse who I would imagine will be the betting favorite, the World Traveler, previous Breeders' Cup Turf champion from back in 2022. Probably ran his best race ever around American configurations at Keeneland back then. What's the buzz on Rebels Romance this season?
And buzz is that he probably just wins it, doesn't he? He's just like, he's such a cool, you've got some cool horse profiles in here. I'm just going to throw that out there. But this lad has got more air miles than any of us could ever wish for. And his win record, right? His actual win record, 14 wins from 21 runs. Like, really think about that. It's actually extraordinary. The majority of them up at the 1.5 miles. Like, in every different continent, on loads of different tracks and surfaces and left and right, etc., etc. He's got a great relationship, obviously, with Godolphin top jockey William Buick. And we last saw him winning in Germany, wasn't it, in the Prix von Europa? Very short price that day, spun around, had a lovely time. He was challenged, maybe people were getting a little bit hot under the collar in the closing stages. Maybe it wasn't quite as easy a victory as you would want from a very short price favorite, but he won all the same. I don't know. Do I see many holes in him? I don't think so. Was it Keeneland where he won Keeneland where he won the turf, and from Stone Age that day. He just travels so well. He runs on so well. He can, as in when I say travels so well, I mean travels in his races so well, but also travels the world so well.
In all senses.
Yeah, I don't know. Is there many flaws in him?
No, he looks pretty good. We'll see what happens with the draw. We'll come back to this race, of course. We have one to talk about in the very next race, the Breeders' Cup Classic, mid-card, 5:41 Eastern on Saturday. And the question of the race, will City of Troy transfer his form? We have other whole videos about this, so we can keep this pretty brief, I think, Vanessa. But what's your gut about whether or not, two questions really. What do you think he'll handle the dirt? Do you think he would be a reasonable wager at the odds that we're expecting to see from him at around 5-2 on the day?
I have no idea.
Either question?
Yeah, to either question. I have no idea, Pete. And I'm happy, like I'm confident enough in my own ability to be able to put my hands up and say, I don't know. I don't know if we're all going to be laughing at his price on the day. I don't know if he's going to be able to handle the dirt. I do not know.
You can't get analysis like this just anywhere, folks.
I just I just don't know. I genuinely don't. I mean, some people, I listen to experts who say that he will handle the dirt. I listen to experts that say he won't. I listen to experts who say his form figure and what he's doing on the track and his sectionals puts him right in there. I listen to other people who tell me that it doesn't. He needs to do more. I don't know.
Well, let me say this. I asked you two questions, and clearly the answer to the first is I don't know. But if the answer to the first is I don't know, then the answer to the second is should we be betting him at 5-2? I feel like is definitely a negative.
Well, that's a no. No, I won't. I will not be backing him at 5-2.
Okay.
But I wouldn't be backing him Do you know why I won't be backing him at any price? And I like genuinely, I just won't be backing him. Is because I will get enough enjoyment if he was to win the Classic. I will get enough enjoyment out of that moment, knowing everything that's gone into that horse and the story, etc. I won't need to have had a penny on at 5-2, 10-1, or 100-1. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to be able to enjoy it for what it is. So that is enough for me.
It's one of the great stories of the Breeders' Cup to follow going in, and would be an incredibly significant moment for the breeding industry itself should the horse win. Can't wait to see this year's Breeders' Cup Classic. Now we'll get on to the filly and mare turf. I'm not going to bother you about the Applebys because they've run in the States a few times since. So unless you have some strong opinion about Beautiful Love or Cinderella's Dream, we've already talked about Content, but I will just ask the key question back about Content. Are you willing to forgive the last 2 runs and key off that Yorkshire Oaks, or do the most recent 2 runs give you doubt?
No doubt. No, I think you can put that down to ground. I think we can just say didn't appreciate the ground. It will have been very soft on Ascot. Champions Day was obviously soft. And then at Longchamp, just didn't get the run of the, the race didn't go to plan at Longchamp that day. That was behind Friendly Soul. From kind of start to finish, really, like just started badly, was in a bad position throughout, came wide, did make some headway, but that I don't think that was her particular true running, and she wasn't beaten that far either. And then obviously on to Ascot she went. You do have to be of a forgiving nature to be team Content, but I'm not unforgiving.
Let's talk about the winner of the Prix de l'Opera, just in behind Friendly Soul, Running Lion. That was a huge run, right-handed on soft. What do we think she's going to do?
Doesn't go.
She's not coming. Go. Oh, I definitely had her in one of my lists. Oh, I'm looking at another updated list that didn't have her. So maybe they decided back too quick, or too many attendant questions there on her. Soprano, we saw race last in the US. I think is she cross-entered between here and the mile? What do you think of her generally?
I think, is she going to run here? I think she's definitely coming over anyway. I think they were really pleased with her, weren't they, that day at Keeneland? They were really pleased with her. And there was a nice story that we latched on to Billy Loughnane's first ride in America.
Yep.
Went, pretty close without being kind of, as in finished second, but she was beaten a long way, wasn't she, that day? So she would have to step back towards what she was doing earlier on in her career. She's kind of gone a bit missing in action there for a little while. And she'd have to bounce kind of back to her previous best bits of form from a few months back. But it's not to say that she can't, and she'll be one of 2 George Bowie runners in these colours, because of course believing in the turf sprint as well in the high clear colours.
What are you hearing about the Aidan O'Brien pair of Wingspan and Ylang Ylang?
Ylang, we had so much hope for her earlier on this year when she won, at the back end of last year when she won the Fillies Mile, and God knows what price she would have been that then. You'd be able to find out. I mean, it's not God knows. You could look back at it as a Guineas horse, and then of course she blew out in the Guineas. Well, she didn't blow out in the Guineas. She just didn't win the Guineas, and she struggled since. And it's one of those things that if you'd said to me after the Fillies Mile, what price about Ylang being this time next year and not having won a race, but has run all season, the price would have been absolutely huge. But yet here we are.
5-1 in that blanket finish of 16 runners altogether, and there was about 5 of them on the wire in the Guineas for that one. Anything on Wingspan, or should we pivot?
Let's pivot. Let's pivot.
We got the mile up next, and I'll let you begin with whoever you want to start with in this year's race. I've got a lot of listed horses here. I've got 7 listed. I don't know if you have. Actually, no. Sounds like Henry, Longfellow, and Mountain Bear are not coming. So that for me leaves Diego Velasquez, Notable Speech, Porta Fortuna, Ramatuelle, and River Tiber. Does that match what you've got in front of you?
Yeah, I've got for me the two most interesting angles in here is Porta Fortuna and Ramatuelle, the two fillies. For two different reasons, really. Porta Fortuna has just been the sort of crack filly this year over here as a 3-year-old. She was a great 2-year-old, and she's just stepped forward. She's so consistent. She travels. She's versatile. She tactically versatile, ground versatile as well. So much to like about her. Obviously, for Medallion Racing, you know the drill by now. US ownership group, keen to run her over here, ran her last year. They've said from very early on that the mile was going to be her aim for Aidan O'Brien. Really looking forward to her running, and she'd have been my big kind of like want her to win type, not necessarily selection, but, you know, in terms of feel good factor story, until, drum roll please, Ramatuelle won the foray at Longchamp. Because once Ramatuelle won the foray at Longchamp, I was suddenly all aboard this French train for Christopher Head. She absolutely bolted up. Now, that performance was a real bounce back to form from what we've seen of her in the Guineas prior, and then at Royal Ascot as well. But those were her only other two. She had a run in France as well. She's only raced 4 times this year, is what I'm trying to say. And the return to the 7 furlongs at Longchamp, that was on very soft ground. She bolted up, literally, and Christopher Head was so engaged. And what I loved about it is afterwards, he said straight away, he was like, we're going to the Breeders' Cup. We're always going to the Breeders' Cup, but now we're going to the Breeders' Cup. And it's like, now we're going to the Breeders' Cup. You know, like this is on, this is happening. She's by Justify, great ownership group. Just loving the fillies in this. Loving the fillies. Ramatuelle and Porta Fortuna. Porta Fortuna, like Miss Consistent. I mean, the betting that I've got in front of me right now has Porta Fortuna just a point bigger than Ramatuelle in the anti-post markets, and that's probably a bit offensive to Porta Fortuna.
She has beaten her twice, but I'm kind of with you. Even without the giant leap forward from Ramatuelle last time, I'm not sure that Ramatuelle, her sort of handy style, isn't going to be better suited for American racing than Porta Fortuna is.
I think you were underestimating Porta Fortuna. I think she's like, I think she can race anywhere, Porta Fortuna. That's what I'm saying about her. She's so versatile. Like, just because of how we've seen her race 2 starts back at Newmarket, or when she won at Ascot as well. She's so versatile. I just think you're underestimating her if you think that she can't do what Ramatuelle can do.
I'm not saying she can't. I just think Ramatuelle might be a little bit better suited to U.S. racing. I think you're right, though. That's too much of a gap in the odds. Is that what you're saying? I mean, Porta Fortuna, I feel like Porta Fortuna could be the favorite in this whole race, let alone just favorite over Ramatuelle. That's kind of how I was guessing they would bet.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that.
But it's going to be fascinating. That's an incredible clash. We've got a strong contingent of Americans, too. A couple of quick thoughts. We're almost out of time. We got about 3 minutes left, Vanessa. But Diego Velasquez, let's talk about him.
Oh, well, if we're talking about anyone here, sorry, we should be talking about Notable Speech, shouldn't we? In terms of that being the favorite in here currently in the anti-post market, our Guineas winner. And when he won the Guineas, I mean, we were all like, because he had this extraordinary profile of being this all-weather horse that's come and won a classic, very kind of different preparation for a classic, goes and wins a Guineas. Then he blows out at Ascot. Then he comes back and he wins at Goodwood. Then he blows out at Longchamp. We've had a bit of a joke with, like a little bit of a joke over here that he's a real, like, he's boom or bust, this horse. It's like all or nothing with him. So he's not a trustworthy candidate. And as a result, he's the 3-year-old colt in here. And he's got such a different profile to that of like the rock solid Porta Fortuna. I just think it's a fascinating clash. And then throw in a Diego Velasquez as well. That would be Aidan's best runner in here. And of course, he stepped up on what he'd been doing previously. They've tried him over further, which is an interesting thing with him. And then they've been bringing him back in trips slowly but surely. You can't help but feel that something in here is going to have too much, like, this is going to be the spicy end of his pace situation. Against the Porta Fortuna, a Ramatuelle, and a Noble Speech, I just think he may get a bit tap for toe round here.
Quick word on River Tiber, and then we'll have touched on all of them.
Quick word on River Tiber. I don't have him going here. Oh no, I've got Mountain Bear and Henry Longfellow not going. River Tiber may well go. Well, River Tiber obviously would be the different profile to that of his stablemate Diego Velasquez, in the sense that River Tiber would be stepping up in trip from where he's shown his better form, versus Diego Velasquez stepping down in trip. And I suppose like the betting doesn't suggest it, but would you rather prefer a speedier type than a sort of slower type? Probably, but I think they're all going to have a job on with the top end of the market, the French horse, Porter, and the Godolphin horse, Notable Speech.
Yeah, I think that probably sounds about right. Wonder if River Tiber wouldn't almost be a pacemaker potentially, hasn't won yet this year. Vanessa, always great having you. Thank you so much for taking time with us today. We're going to do sort of the flip side of this video where we just focus on the 10 euros we're most excited to see. You can find that on the Breeders' Cup YouTube channel. So to get the best info you're going to get, make sure you subscribe to the Breeders' Cup YouTube channel. We'll have some exclusive stuff there in the Money Media YouTube channel. And then for more, much more, check out In the Money Plus, inthemoneypodcast.com/plus. Vanessa, look forward to speaking with you next week.
Well, I can't wait. I actually feel like that wasn't my best effort in terms of, a rundown, Pete, because people will be listening to this being like, she's not given any firm views at all. But
that's not what this video is.
No, and they will come. They will come. And what's nice is you kind of bash it out in a more generic style, and then you get to hone in on the real strong views.
It's part of the process, and those will be coming in the Money Media YouTube channel, in the Money Players podcast, wherever you get your podcast. Shout out once again to this video sponsor, TwinSpires, twinspires.com, back in the tournament's game in a big way. You can play the BCBC there. You can qualify for the Kentucky Derby betting challenge. We'll be back with more very soon. May you win all your photos.